Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Doug Larkin. I am in the Department of Teaching and Learning at Montclair State University. I'm here with some other colleagues from Montclair State University, and very briefly, I'll just ask them to introduce themselves. Sammy, can I ask you to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sammy Mazger. I'm the program advisor for the Masters of Education in Teaching for Equity and Justice. I work in the Department of Teaching and Learning, and I'm currently the graduate program administrator.
Thanks, Sammy. Diane?
Hi, my name is Diane Cavanero. I am the P3 MAR program coordinator for South Jersey for the P3 MAR program. Welcome to everybody. Glad to see so many people here tonight.
Thanks, Diane. And I should have said for myself, I am the program coordinator for this brand new program. It's a master's in education and teaching for equity and justice. We are super excited about it. This has been a long time in the works, and we're really excited to bring it to you. And I have a couple slides. We'll walk through it. And if you have a question that can't wait, feel free to throw it in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to do a whole bunch of questions at the end. One of the things that we're building still is the web presence for this page. So you may have seen one page, but in order to have an FAQ page, of frequently asked questions, we have to have some questions. So the things that you ask, there's no such thing as a silly question, except the one that is not asked. So if you ask those, ask any question you have about the program, I'm actually going to keep track of those and put some answers for those up on our webpage, just so that people have those answers moving forward. Okay. So I'm going to begin here. So the first thing to note is this is a question I've been asked multiple times already, and I think some of you I've responded to in email. I have an answer for this. So by attending this session, by signing up for it, your fee will be waived for this program. And just use the same email address in your application that you used to register for this information session. I will tell you that for simplicity's sake, just for this first year of the program, we are probably going to be waiving all application fees. No probably about it. We are going to be waiving all application fees the first year of this program as we get things up and running. But it is helpful to us to keep track of folks. So if you can use that same email when you fill out an application, if you decide to fill out an application, that'd be great. But generally for Montclair, if you attend an information session and you sign up for it through the graduate admissions website, which is how probably many of you found out about this session, that email address is recorded and the application fee is waived. And that's true for all our programs, including the graduate open house. This program was, by the time when we had the graduate open house earlier this semester, we did not have this program up and running yet, so we couldn't include it there, but we're including it now. Okay. So that's the first FAQ. Okay. So I'd like to start with just a brief poll to see who's in the room as we talk about who this program is for. So I'm going to launch a poll and it's only got 2 questions. If you're on an iPhone or you're driving or you're cooking dinner for your kids, don't feel like you have to do this poll. But I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. The first one is who is here at this info session? So there's 8 options there. The first one is like you're brand new to Montclair, you've never taken any courses. The second one is you've taken an undergrad course, but nothing beyond that. And then the rest of the questions ask about, what program you either are currently in or may have completed. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a few seconds to click that. Thank you. We're at 2/3 participation now. Oh, look at this. You guys are great. Look at. You can tell when a group's all set for an online session. Okay, thanks everybody. We're just about at full participation here, so I'm gonna move us along. So I'm going to share the results here. So I always like sharing it so you can see who's in the room. So we have a few folks who So 7 out of 22 have not taken grad courses at Montclair. We have 4 folks who are currently in a program, and we have 11 folks who've completed a certificate program. Great. Okay, so the next question is, well, see if it will let me launch it. Well, it's not letting me launch it. I'm going to let that one go. Okay, I'm going to let that one go. It was just a question of who's filled out an application yet. We can talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so this program is for people who want to, quote, go back and get your master's. And we recognize that many people who are interested in going back and getting their master's are also interested in doing other things. So we have a number of certificate and certification programs at Montclair, and we'll talk about each of them in a moment, where people have earned credits already or would like to start a program and earn those certificates or certifications. But many of those are maybe 9, 12, 15, 18. They're not quite a full master's degree. So in the state of New Jersey, a master's degree has to be 30 credits or more. This program is exactly 30 credits. But we also wanted to create a program that was unique and that represented who we are as a university at Montclair. And really, the idea here is that we have a master's program that focuses on the coursework through this lens of equity and social justice. In the core of the program, we have courses in curriculum, assessment, pedagogy, and research. All of those with a focus on equity and justice. And in the program itself, we'll explore the dimensions of those. But we are talking about racial, social, cultural, linguistic, multiple ability, multiple forms of diversity, and what does it mean to be a teacher focused on equity and justice in your classrooms. And so we've designed this program recognizing that we have a really broad range of people who might be interested in it. Some of whom have been certified as teachers in New Jersey, some of whom may have certifications from outside in other states or even other countries. Some who may be educators who are not certified, but who have taught in private or parochial schools or international schools, and who are still interested in coming back for the master's. So one of the things that we've done for this program is we do want people who have teaching experience. And alternate route is kind of in a separate bucket, and I'll talk about alternate route in a second. But if you're not in the alternate route program at Montclair, we do want people who have or will have, by the time the program starts, 3 years of teaching experience. And however you want, you're going to tell us how you define that in your application. But we do want people who are educators in this program. So that's really who this program is for. And we define educators broadly. We can talk about K-12 teachers. We can talk about instructional supports. We can talk about administrators. We can even talk about community college instructors. There's a broad array of education vocations that are not necessarily, K-12 teaching. Early childhood preschools are included in that. So we're really trying to make a program for a wide variety of people who can meet some of their educational needs in this program. So another question, how long will this program take? So it's a 30 credit program. If you're starting from 0 credits, which somebody entering new to Montclair would be starting this program fresh, we recommend 2 courses per semester. So just doing the math there, that's 2 times 3 credits each. Each course is 3 credits. That's 6 credits a semester. So it would take you 5 semesters to complete the 30 credits. Now we do offer courses in the summer. So those 30 credits could be completed in fall, spring, summer, fall, spring. There's a few little timing issues for finishing up the program I'll talk about in a minute when we get to the graphics. If you have already completed an alternate route program, let me circle back to alternate route. So we require 3 years of experience unless you're coming out of the alternate route program, in which case, most people finishing an alternate route program will have 2 years of classroom experience. But if you're coming out of our Montclair program, you can go right from the alternate route program into the MED. The one thing about it is the alternate route program is 24 credits long. There may be some people who completed a 21 credit version in the past. But the, excuse me, only 18 of those 24 credits are applicable to this program. And you'll see why in a minute. So that would mean that only 4 courses would remain if you have those 18 credits complete already. And if you've completed those in the last 5 years, you're eligible for using those credits in this program. And you could finish this course this program in as little as a year, 2 courses in the fall, 2 in the spring. Again, this is a state of New Jersey regulation. All master's degrees have to have some sort of culminating experience or comprehensive exam. What we are permitted to do and what we have done with this MED program is we are allowed to make that culminating experience part of a course. So for those of you who have maybe looked at the MAT program in the past, that's an initial teacher certification program, there is a comprehensive exam in that program. In this one, the culminating experience, we call it the Capstone Action Research Project, and it is part of the capstone course, which is the TLRN. I'll end up saying that very quickly, TLRN. It's the Department of Teaching and Learning, TLRN 590. That's the capstone course. And for those of you who enter the program, as you're planning out your work program, that course needs to be taken during the last semester of your program, because that course has that culminating experience in it, and you're meant to sort of reckon with the content and substance of all of the coursework you've taken in the program up to that point as part of that research project. So the question of cost, how much will it cost? And again, those of you who have already completed some certificate or certification coursework coming into this program, obviously you're going to need fewer credits to graduate. So it could be as little as 12 credits if you've got 18 complete already. If you're coming in fresh and it's 30 credits, it would be at our graduate tuition rate. We don't have the 2024 rates, 24-25 rates yet. So I just put in the slide here the current rates, and they usually, I think they go up about 2 or 3% a year. I can't give you an exact number now, but we do, looking at it at a per credit rate is how we run this program. I recognize there are other graduate programs where they give you the full cost up front. You can calculate it, but we're beholden to whatever the tuition rate is that semester. One exception is if your specialization is a fully online certificate program, and I'll note which ones those are. Those have a lower cost because those are fully online. This program, we're not advertising it as fully online, but as you'll see, you can complete it online if that's what you would like to do. But there are some of the options, some of the different paths that people might follow in this program do include some face-to-face courses. So we can't quite say this program is a fully online program, but it does have a lot of those features if you're taking just those certificate programs, you will get that lower tuition rate. Okay, so here's the structure of the program, and this is probably what you all came here to see. This program, as I mentioned, it's 30 credits, and it has 3 distinct pieces. Now, this is the general format, and as I'm going to show you in the next slide when we get there, it's different for some of the different courses. I will say that the online courses for the TRLN core, and I see there's a question in the chat already. I'll try to keep up, but the courses in the core are synchronous online. So that means you have online class at a certain time. You'll log in at that time. You'll expect it to be fully present in and at least mind and spirit and in body on the other side of the camera here. These are participatory classes. It's a master's degree. There are some of the other courses in some of the other programs and some of the electives may be different modalities, and I have a list of them that I'll show you in a moment. But many of them are that same way, where if they're online, they're synchronous online. And if you're familiar with the Montclair catalog, they're listed as SON, synchronous online. And so the 4 core courses, and again, if you finish the alternate route and that's all you have left, all 4 of those courses will be synchronous online. Excuse me, will be synchronous online. There will be a professor on the other end. You'll be in community with them for 2.5 hours each week as part of that class. So there are those 4 courses. As I mentioned, we have a curriculum course, Curriculum and Instructional Design for Equity and Justice. That's TLRN 503. We have Culturally Responsive and Socially Just Pedagogy. That's TLRN 504. Those 2 courses are the ones that we will be offering this fall. And the ones that will be offered in the coming spring 25, are TLRN 505, Advanced Assessment Practices for Equitable Classrooms, and TLRN 590, Capstone Inquiry into Teaching and Learning for Equity and Justice. And you see I put the little cap on the stone at the bottom to really drive home that point. That is the capstone course. Now, everybody in this program will take those 4 courses. There are no substitutions for those. Nothing can count for those 4 courses. I'm going to skip over the electives for a second and talk about the specialization. And I think we're actually using the word concentration now, but I think at least in the marketing materials, it still says specialization. So I'll say that here. But you'll have a concentration in one of these 8 programs: Bilingual-Bicultural Education, Teaching English as a Second Language, the Alternate Route Teacher Certification Program, Educational Assessment, Gifted and Talented, Nutrition and Exercise Science, K-12 Computer Science Teaching, and Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. So I notice it says 12 credits up there, but some of those are more than 12 credits. Some of them are less. I'm going to show you how we kind of make up the balance with the electives. The electives one is the squishy one. The idea is to get up to 30 credits with these courses. But let's say you do take the 12 credits, like a bilingual-bicultural certification is 12 credits. So that would mean that you would have the 12 credits of the core, the 12 credits of the specialization, and then you would have to pick 6 credits, which is 2 classes, from a long list, and I'll show you that list in a moment, of courses that are offered regularly from the Department of Teaching and Learning. And at the end, you will have a 30-credit master's degree, you'll have a capstone project, and at the very end, you will have a master's degree. So as I mentioned, the TRLN 590 course must be taken in the final semester. Currently, it's a spring-only class. So that's why I said the timing might matter. If you start this program in the spring, you might only be able to take, class. You would probably have to go 3 semesters because you can't take that capstone course during your first semester. Some others, just sort of little details. Right, those TRLN core I mentioned, they're taught in a synchronous online format, and we will use this Zoom platform for that. We have, because this is a master's degree, we have expectations that might be a little different from our undergraduate classes, in that, the expectations are, master's study is different. It's more rigorous. We expect full intellectual engagement, and there's a community to it. So it's not the type of thing where you can just sort of keep your screen off and listen to it, right? Like it's fully it's as participatory as if you were sitting in a classroom where things were happening. And I will tell you that we're all, the core faculty in this program are all seasoned educators who, we try to walk the talk. We try to model the pedagogy that we advocate. And that's, in our view, that's active. And it's part of the ethos of this program to make sure that that we have a student-centered program. Okay, I see the messages are piling up. I'm going to kind of get through my thing and then I'll go back to those. Okay, so, and then these other courses, the TRLN electives and the specializations, they may be face-to-face, hybrid, synchronous, online. I didn't, there was one or two asynchronous online courses, but typically we don't do those for our graduate, for the specializations in this program. That could change, but that's, given what's there now in the catalog, you know, that, again, it depends on your preference and which certification you want to go for. And then if you have completed a specialization in the past 5 years, and that means fall 2019 or later, you may use that certificate or certification for the M.Ed in teaching for equity and justice. And that 5-year rule is going to be true going forward. And that's, we don't have any control over that. That's something from the provost's office. I know that in other programs that if you're taking a long time to finish, that it's not a 5-year window, it's a 10-year window, but that they're not doing that for this because this program might take a while for some folks to finish, especially if they're just doing one course a semester. So that's why they set the 5-year maximum on rolling those previously earned certificate or certification credits into this stackable degree. Okay, so here are the 8 programs, and I've listed them now in actually how many credits they are. And I'm just going to hit my next thing here. Okay, so for these top 4 are fully online certificate programs. The Gifted and Talented, the Educational Assessment, Bilingual-Bicultural, and the K-12 Computer Science Teaching. All of those courses are all of those certificate programs are fully online. The other one's Nutrition and Exercise Science. That one has face-to-face courses, as does the Teaching English as a Second Language and Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. Those are two, the difference between them is one is a New Jersey teaching certification that you add on to an additional cert, and the other is not. And there's a 3-credit difference in those programs. And then there's the alternate route programs, which all of them have that 18 credits. So if you're alternate route, you will not need to take any electives. We're counting the extra courses that you took in the alternate route. They are teaching and learning courses from our department. So we're counting them already as electives that are taken. The one thing I want to say here is that in this program, you're going to have 2 advisors. So for the M.Ed part, you know, Sammy Mesger, who introduced herself earlier, is going to be the person who's going to be working with you to make sure that you've got the right courses on the Teaching for Equity and Justice core and the electives part. But when you apply to this program, you're actually going to be applying to a certificate or certification program if you're new to the program, right? If you still have courses to complete in that. And you'll have a program advisor for that part of the program too. So that's when we talk about this degree being stackable, that's what we mean. The certificate program is one sort of piece of it, and then our piece with the TRLN core and the elective stacks on top of that. So you have one advisor for this piece, one for this piece. And it is going to take just a little bit of just calendaring to make sure that you can take the courses that you need at the various times that they're offered. And of course, Sammy and I are here to help you make any of those decisions that you need to make. Okay, I only have a couple more slides and then we'll open it up for questions. So there's a very long list of electives. I went through them yesterday just to see which ones were offered in the past, well, this coming fall, the summer, and spring. So all of these elective courses have been offered in the 12-month period. And of these, I think all but 4 of them were offered online, or a section of them was offered online. So if your concern is about completing, you know, having to come to campus when all of your other courses are online, let me just assure you that there are going to be plenty of online offerings. And really what we've done is the electives actually come from some of the other certificate programs. So let's say you've done your you're doing your K-12 computer science teaching course, and you only need one more elective, well, you might want to take one of those courses from the bilingual bicultural program to learn a little bit about the language diversity and pedagogy strategies that you might use with your own students. And you notice all these courses are 500 level or above, and that's what defines graduate level in from the university standpoint. Less than 500 is undergrad, over 500 is grad. So now this is just what's been offered in the last 12 months. And again, Sammy and I will work with you to make sure that you are aware of what electives are available to you if you're in the program. Okay, and so I think I want to finish with a sample program roadmap. And again, this is for somebody coming in new to the program. But let's say that you do that thing that we're asking you to do is, take 2 courses per semester to keep pace and track yourself through the program. So maybe fall of year 1, if you were in the bilingual bicultural certificate, and again, I'm using that as an example because it's got 12 credits, you would take TRLN 503 and ECL 527 during that first semester. And then you can kind of see you take 2, you take one of the core and one of the specializations each semester. You don't have to do it that way. And again, it depends on what courses are offered and what times are available and what your life looks like. But if you follow this plan, you could finish if you came in the fall of year 1, you could finish that 30 credit program by the spring of year 2. Okay. So I see there is a whole pile of messages in the chat, and I'll try to get to them in turn. So let me pull this up here. I need to make it just a little bigger so I can see it here. Okay. Right. So Diane, so the application for this program, and I recognize some of you may have already started the application. You will see it asks you if you have completed a program or not. But even if you've completed a program, you still have to apply to the graduate school. Or if you're in a program now, you still have to apply for this program through the graduate school application. Okay, I already have a master's degree from Montclair State in elementary education, K-6, as well as special ed. I'm looking to work on my master's plus 30. Would this program work for me? So there's 30 credits in this, and none of the courses in here are the ones that you would have taken to earn your initial teacher certification or your teaching students with disabilities cert. Oh, do you have that one yet? No. Oh, yes, you do. The special ed. So we call it teaching students with disabilities cert. So yes, this would work for your master's plus 30. So you would get those 30 credits and a second master's degree at the end. Could I please write the courses in the chat? So I'm going to share these slides with you. I'm not quite at a, I will put the slides in the chat and then you can reference them afterwards. Oh, thank you, Diane. Okay. Oh, you guys are great. Okay. The teaching English as a second language cert offered in person. Yeah, so that one has the TESOL and the both of those at this time are in person, what we call face-to-face or hawk-to-hawk. It'll say H-to-H, H-to-H. I was a chemistry teacher, so that means something different to me, H-to-H. But the that hawk-to-hawk, that means like an in-person class. If there's enough interest over time, that may change. But for now, for fall 24, those courses are listed in person. And yes, the recording of this, we will send you a link to it when we're done. So the MED is, I'm reading Adam's question. The question is the MED the same as a master's in teaching? Well, it depends. We use the term master's rather loosely in everyday talk, but when you enter in a profession, sometimes there's specialized language for things. So we say it's the MAT degree, the Master's of Arts in Teaching, is the name of a degree that only applies to initial teacher certification. So if you want to become certified as a teacher, only, that's all that you want, and you want a master's degree in just that, this might not be the program for you. Unless you want to go the alternate route and then put this program on top of it at the end, then it might be. But there's multiple kinds of master's degrees. So we have, I'm simplifying a little bit, but we have 3 master's degree programs in our department, 3 types of master's degree. So we have the MAT, which does the Masters of Arts in Teaching. That's initial teacher certification. We have an MED in inclusive education and special education, and that really is continuation of the Teaching Students with Disabilities certificate. You notice the Teaching Students with Disabilities certificate is not here, and that's because we don't want to pull students out of that program. We want that program to continue. So we have the MAT, the MED in inclusive education and special education, and now we will have this one, which is probably the broadest scope of all of those 3 because it can have so many different certifications. So if you say, is the statement true, I'm going back and getting my master's? Yes, this would be that. But it's a master's of education, and it requires that you already have the bachelor's, but it doesn't require that you have the teaching certification, right? Just that you are an educator, however defined. Sammy, I'm seeing you're answering these questions in the chat. Maybe I should go from the bottom up.
Doug, can I just interject one thing here?
Please, I need a drink.
The Masters in Inclusive Ed, the Masters of Education in Inclusive Ed, I've had some of my students inquire about that. I talked to Dr. Lalvani, and not all of those courses are offered online that are required for that. So I just wanted for my students who are offsite here from the Bridgeton campus or the South Jersey campus, not all of those courses that are required for the MED in Inclusive Ed would be online. So they would either be hybrid and it would involve some travel. So I just wanted them to be aware of that because a few of them have inquired about that to me. But the last I spoke to her, we're not at that point yet where we can offer those courses all online.
Right, and that's a different degree.
Correct.
However, I want to give a caveat there. Some of those courses that are used in that program do show up in our elective list. So if I can just go back in my, so the one I want to highlight here, this one's SPED 579, Special Education for Students with Disabilities. So that's part of our P12 Teaching Students with Disabilities program. So let's say you're doing the bilingual-bicultural degree, but you say, you know, I need to get my head around working with students with disabilities. And so we would recommend, like, that would be a great course to take. And that particular course, even though all of the courses in that inclusive ed MED are, you know, some might be in person, some might be online. That particular course does have an online modality. And so there might be an opportunity to take some of those courses as the electives, even if you're not in that program. It doesn't lead to that Teaching Students with Disabilities certification. To do that, you would have to enter that program. I'm just gonna, can we take, no, you can't take all of the courses in the fall unless it's 2. Right now, at this point, we're offering just 503 and 504 in the fall and 505 and 590 in the spring. If this program grows large enough, and you know, it's always a possibility, then we might start adding more sections throughout the year. But at this point, that's the plan that we made with the registrar's office. What's the difference between this program and the Ed Leadership program? Well, there's a lot of differences. So the Ed Leadership, so there's a couple different Ed Leadership programs. But that particular, a lot of the Ed Leadership programs are geared towards leading to a supervisor's certificate or an administrative certification. So our program doesn't, and you notice none of the electives are from those programs. That's a sort of, I want to encourage anybody who's thinking about a master's degree to think about what your goal is in getting a master's degree. If it's just to get the degree because you want a degree, you know, you might not get what you want once you're in it if you don't pick a degree program that's aligned with your goals and values. So choosing a master's degree is a significant commitment of both your resources and your time. And so you want something that is going to not just be a piece of paper to hang on the wall, but something that makes you the kind of teacher that you want to be, the type of educator that you want to be. So if you do want to be, eventually in educational leadership, if you want to be a department chair or vice principal or, or even a guidance counselor or something, then this probably isn't the right program for you. Kate, I hope I answered your question adequately.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. For alternate route students, what is the price again per credit? The MAR program. So I have to be clear that this is not the MAT that was part of the MAR program. The cost will be about the same because this one's only 12 credits and that was 15 credits. And if there were 15 slightly cheaper credits, our 12 credits at the grad rate is, I don't know the exact amount, but this program that we're putting in place to replace what was there for the MAR because it was not working for students. And I don't want to go into super detail about why, but this program is, that program didn't have a fully online component. It had 6 credits of clinical practice. It was sort of a workaround that got frozen in place for about 15 years. And this is a fix for that. So I can tell you that, that it's going to be 850-ish per credit. So if you only need 12 credits, it's 12 times 850. So I haven't done the math on that, but we probably could. Let's see. Do you have to prove you are working with like the MAR program? So the MAR program, just to be clear, like once you finish that, the reason you have to prove you're working for the MAR program is because the state requires that. Because the MAR program is you are learning to teach on the job. If you're not on the job, then you can't be in the program. That's the requirement. We don't have that requirement here. We just want to know that you have at least made it to the end of your alternate route program. Although you can apply in the spring before the before the end of the school year, as long as you will have, for alternate route, as long as you have those 2 years of experience. And from the states, using the state's language, you've completed that provisional teacher program. And you've done everything you need to do on that end in order to complete that program. Then you can be accepted into the MED program.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can I interrupt 1 second?
Please. Who is
That was my question. It's Jamie.
Oh, hi, Jamie.
I was an aide throughout. So I just want to understand you correctly. I was an aide throughout the whole MAR program. So I did not go in the provisional program yet.
But you completed the alternate route program?
Well, there's a little hiccup. I had some family stuff going on. So I'm still like finishing, but I got an extension. So yes, I will have completed it it should be, I think my deadline's June 25th.
Right. So, but you're enrolled in the alternate route program.
Yeah,
right?
I'll be done the whole program. It'll be
Right.
done.
So from the state perspective, when you're enrolled in an alternate route program, you have that provisional license. I know you have the CE, but they call it that provisional teacher program.
But I never applied. They never could apply for that because I was only an aide.
Right. We do accept students working full-time in classrooms if they are instructional assistants in the P3 MAR program.
So again, our position is as long as you've completed what you need to do for the alternate route program.
Okay.
I didn't realize that, but like as long as you've completed the alternate route program or will complete it by the time of the start of this program, you are eligible to apply. You fit the definition of an educator. So we would accept you in the MED for the same reason that Diane just said. You were accepted into the alternate route program.
Okay. All
Does
right.
that answer your, did it?
Yeah, as long as I don't have to have my standard or anything, because I won't have that.
No, that's, we were careful about not including that because,
Okay.
I'll just tip my hand a little bit. So I've done some work in international teacher education, And we had a Montclair delegation go to the Dominican Republic a couple years ago. And I had wished we had had a program to offer them that was like this one, so that teachers who were educators in the DR who wanted to come to Montclair and earn a master's degree didn't have to do student teaching, because there's some rules about being an international student and doing student teaching and ending up with a state license. It was very complicated and it didn't work. So we have built this program to be as flexible as possible, using that broad definition of educator. So I hope that gets to your question there, Jamie.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Okay. So Joel, can you I'm not sure I understand your question. Do you mind hopping on and asking it? Are you still with us? Maybe not. So I'll answer it anyway in case you're watching this in the future. Hi, Joel. So you are if you're an international student, you are eligible for this program. You just have to meet all of the admission requirements of the graduate school. And you will see when you go on that, there's a section for international students. And that includes, when you're in a master's degree program, we do require a 3.0 GPA. And so that sometimes it's hard to figure that out from an international perspective because the grade systems don't line up. And so there is a transcript organization that we use. The name escapes me off the top, but the link is there. Might be called AWS if I remember right. But your transcript, if it was earned from a university outside of the United States, that would be part of your application. And so in the program, as long as you meet the graduate school's requirement for admission, and particularly you meet the requirements for whatever certificate program or certification program you're applying to, if you meet all of those criteria, then we will accept you into the MED, as long as you have that experience, either 2 years as an alternate route or 3 years otherwise. Let's see. I'm about to start my alternate route in computer science. Is this program for me? James, can you tell me a little bit more? Because we have a computer science certificate in New Jersey, but we don't yet have a computer science certification, an initial teacher certification. Right now, computer science is an add-on once you have your initial cert. So I'm not sure I quite understand.
Actually, I'm starting my provisional teaching certificate, and I was asked by NJDOE to start my endorsement in William Patterson.
Mm-hmm.
That's for computer science. So is that similar to Montclair?
So I'm unfamiliar with William Patterson's program. So that's the thing. We're not at a point yet where we can accept courses from other universities for the certificate or specialization. We probably can for the electives, to be honest. But we have a fully online program in computer science, teaching. It's 15 credits, and it is part of this MED. So I would say if you're doing the William Patterson program, then you can't do this master's with that. We can't accept the William Patterson program yet. Maybe someday in the future, the state is pushing us to share resources across institutions. But at this point, for this first year of the program, it has to be the Montclair Computer Science certification program, which I think is fantastic. By the way, we have some really amazing people teaching that in that program. So I don't know if you comparison shopped and looked around, but I know that's a 15 credit endorsement everywhere.
Yeah. So maybe I'll just inquire again back to with NJDOE if they would accept Montclair computer science as maybe a requirement of my provisional teaching certificate.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were the ones who helped develop that program, so we were one of the first ones.
Oh.
So if they just want you to have that computer science teaching certificate, I'm sure they would accept it. And now there's a couple of them. I think Rowan's got one too. But I don't know if, I mean, you can look and see if I don't know if William Patterson's leads to a master's degree. But if that's
Yeah,
something you want,
yeah. That's why I'm interested in this program, because if I'll take William Patterson, it's not leading to a master's degree. So
are
that's
you doing
why
your alternate route at Montclair or somewhere else?
I'm about to start that.
At Montclair
Uh,
or at William Patterson?
I'll get in touch first with NJDOE.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, so Jamie, so the research paper that was pass or fail grade last year was an exam. I'm not sure which program you're talking about, Jamie, but probably like if I'm not sure which one. Were you in the MAT program?
I think they might have answered the question in there.
I'll let
Now,
them
there
know.
was a coworker that told me about the pass or fail exam. She said how difficult it was.
Yeah, well,
You
mean,
know
so
what? It was in the MAP program.
that's true.
That's not part of it, right?
Right. But I don't want to, here's the thing I don't want to do. I don't want to say it's going to be easy, right? This is one of those very, hard master's degrees are not easy by design. And we don't try to make them intentionally difficult, but and the reason that master's degrees are challenging, especially one like this, is because, those of you who've become teachers, you know that teaching changes who you are as a person. As you start to know more and as you start to interact with students in different ways, it's almost impossible not to grow as a person. And if there's anything that we know about being human beings on Earth, is that growth can be painful and can be challenging. But I also want to, there was that phrase that they used to use for the Peace Corps in the old days, like it's the toughest job you'll ever love, right? And I want to say that it's tough, but not unreasonably so. But I want to make sure that we set expectations that, entering a master's program is making a commitment to change and grow. And so, are there going to be hard parts? Absolutely. Are there going to be, challenges that you have to figure out how to overcome? Yes. Are they going to be worthwhile? We really, really hope so. And we're trying to design this program in that way. There are places where you can go where they'll stamp out a master's degree if you pay them the right amount of money, and it doesn't really take that much work. This is not that kind of program. Montclair is full of, my colleagues really take seriously what they do. And everybody who's a part of this program is really dedicated to the principles of this program and making sure that we are preparing people to deepen their commitment to equitable and just teaching in their practice, wherever it might be. Okay, Sammy, thank you for answering some of these. Let's see. Finish the alternate route program, taken 2 courses for the bilingual-bicultural certifications. Okay, so again, the 4 core courses of this program, nothing will substitute for them. So if you want to keep taking that bilingual-bicultural, by all means do. If you finish the alternate route program within the last, again, from 2019 until now, then you could just start this master's program. You wouldn't need any other additional courses other than that. If you want to complete your bilingual-bicultural certification and use some of those alternate route courses, we just can't substitute those 4 core courses of the program. Carol, I hope that answers your question. I'm not quite sure.
So I finished the alternate route and I've already taken 2 of the courses. What I'm not sure is if the courses that we're going to be using for the master's program are exactly the same courses for the bilingual certification. Because if so, then I would only need 2 more classes for the bilingual. But then I also just got my CE for the ESL. So I was wondering, is that like a dual degree program, or can I also get the ESL along with it?
So that might be a more complicated discussion we can have later, but I'll tell you the general rule of things is that you can only spend those 3 credits once on a degree. So you have a range of courses there, and it sounds like you've got a couple different things going on. You got the alternate route. My suggestion, if you do want this master's degree, you can take the 4 courses and finish the master's degree. And, you can continue working on that, whether it's the TESL cert or the bilingual-bicultural certification. Now, those are different courses in those programs. And I'm unfamiliar with the NACES requirements for that particular program. But what I can say is that, you've got a lot of courses out there, and if you can kind of figure out which thing you want to finish first, or if you want to get started on this master's program and kind of keep the bilingual culture, you don't need anything. You have the alternate route. Did you finish in 2019 or later?
I finished the alternate route this semester, the spring of 2024.
So we can just set aside all the bilingual and TESL courses. You can enter the MED and just use those alternate route courses. But if you want the ESL certification, right, you're going to need to take those classes as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have multiple pathways in front of you, and my advice would be to pick one to do first. Whether it's this master's degree or you have 18 credits towards the master's degree. The bilingual bicultural, you don't need those for the master's degree because you've already got 18 from the alternate route. We can't just lump them what we can't do is lump them all together and count, okay, you've got 30. No, that doesn't work because you need the 4 classes that are the core of the MED program. Does that make sense? Will there be clinical, are there test scores required for this application? We are not requiring it for the MED. However, depending on which certificate you're applying for, I don't think that any of the certificates required GRE scores, but that's something that I will look up and put on the FAQ when we get back to it. But Sammy, I don't know if you know that one. I don't know that one about test scores for the other cert programs for like bilingual, bicultural. Do we?
I don't know. Alex, would you happen to know? Are there test scores required for the certification programs and certificate programs?
Oh, let me see. Hold on.
Okay, thanks.
There aren't any for the P3 MAR, I can tell you that.
Yeah,
That's great. That answers my question. Thank you.
and because we're not initial certification, we don't do the praxis tests either. Again, having a bachelor's degree is a big part of having a master's, getting a master's degree. Then you having a bachelor's degree tells us a whole lot about your capacity to continue on with the MED. But even in we have a doctoral program, and I teach in that program as well. And one of the thoughts that we had is we didn't really have a master's degree that served as a springboard into doctoral work. And so if you think that's something in your future someday, this would be a good way to help you figure out whether what your doctoral path might look like if that was something that you choose to do. I think the number is somewhere around maybe 5 or 10% of master's students continue on for a doctorate, but we do have that at Montclair. We have a couple different programs. We have a teacher education and teacher development program. We have a brand new clinical psychology program. We have a math education doctoral program, and a few other ones, but those are the education focused ones. We have a family studies and human development one also. Okay, so there's a question there about cohorts. Not really. The cohorts, because we're working with so many different certificate programs, it would be really hard to maintain the integrity of a cohort. The more important, the way that we've wrangled that is in that capstone course. The people in that class you will become pretty tight with because you are going to be sharing your research with those folks. And I would venture to say even across all the TRLN core classes. But we can't put people on a conveyor belt in this course because people are coming from so many different certificate programs. And that's the nature of stackable programs. Adam, did I get your question?
Yeah, so
Thank you for answering. Yeah, that's pretty much just the main thing I wanted to clarify. Like, I'm starting a new district in the fall, and I kind of wanted to just take that semester to, get used to the new curriculum and everything. Would I be able to start in January? I would only need those 4 core classes. I just finished the P to 3 alternate route program at Montclair State.
Yeah. So yes, you could start in January. And you would it would take you 3 semesters to finish.
Okay.
You do 1 class in January, 2 in the fall, and then the capstone the following spring.
Okay. Thank you.
Rock on. Okay. So thank you, Diane. So I was a little bit wrong about the praxis because it is required for the alternate route program. If you're in the alternate route program, obviously you do need to pass praxis. You need that praxis 2 score, I think, even to begin teaching, right? That's a state of New Jersey requirement.
That is correct.
Right. And so, that's so that is so I was incorrect. There is the 1 test for that one, and again, for alternate route, for those of you who might be thinking about going into the alternate route program, we have 3 different alternate route certifications, and they're age bands. So we have one that's a P3 alternate route certification, preschool to age to grade 3. We have a kindergarten to K6, kindergarten to grade 6. And then we have one, it's called P12 subject area. And the P is a little misleading there, but if you think about music teachers, PE teachers, art teachers, they span those grade levels from elementary all through secondary schools. The biology, chemistry, physics teachers, yeah, even though it says P12, they're really just in the secondary schools, the middle and high schools. But so that 3rd grade band is called P12. So when you are, if you are thinking about applying for the alternate route program, I will say there's a 50-hour course that you have that's part of the state requirement. We do offer that as an online course from Montclair, and you just take that course. It has an observation requirement where you go out and observe a classroom. But for the master's degree here, unless there's something within one of the certificate or certification programs, we're not going out and observing you teaching. I want to make that clear. Like, we don't do observations of you. And in fact, our orientation is to see you as a professional. And our intent is to work with you to help you grow as a professional. So it's very different from initial teacher certification in that way. Again, with alternate route is a little bit different because in alternate route, you do have people observing you during those first 2 years of that program. But when you come into the master's coursework, that won't happen. Those 4 courses are online synchronous courses.
Hi, Douglas. I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I applied for my certificate of eligibility for that alternate road, and I'm sad because Montclair is not in the options NJDO gave me. I only have Brookdale and William Patterson. So if you're saying that you have an alternate a route for computer science, because you say it's P12.
Is that the
So,
technical education certificate?
yeah.
So if they're saying, yeah, so CTE, and again, just for anybody listening, so CTE is a whole separate class of alternate route certificates, which are more.
So you don't have CTE?
We do not have CTE programs. No,
Mm.
and in
But
fact, I would recommend the Brookdale one is fully online.
CTE.
About the CTE is fully online.
But I also have another endorsement, which is technology education.
Is that an initial certification or you're starting? See, the thing is, for some of those CTEs, there's.
Oh no,
I'm sorry,
I have 2 endorsements. One is the CTE, and the other one is technology education. So, will that fall under P12 with specialization?
Well, so technology education is the one area where there's a CEAS, a CE, and a CTE. So which one of those 3 is it? Do you know?
I have a CE, and I have also an endorsement for computer science. It's a different endorsement.
Yeah. So James, we should probably set up a separate time to chat.
Okay, okay.
And so email. I'm gonna put my email in the chat here. Oh, and actually, I'll put it. Okay, there it is. It's on the slide there. larkind@montclair.edu. And so if you email me, you'll probably hear back from me and or Sammy. We're basically copying each other on all of our answers as we get this thing going. But I'd be happy to set up a time to talk to you if you could send me stuff in advance, so I can look at things like transcripts and what program you're in. That would be helpful. But if you've been hired in a position that requires a CTE, that is not something that we do at Montclair. There are a certain number of vocational subjects that do have CEs, like agriculture. We're getting ready to offer some of those, but that's not yet part of this discussion of this program.
Doug, could you speak to the application itself and what is required? And my second part of this question is, all P3 MAR students are applying to the MED in Equity and Justice for on-campus. Is that clear? They won't be choosing off-site Bridgeton cohort as they did for the MAT?
Correct.
Okay.
So
And
even though it says on campus,
it's
it means
online.
our main campus, right?
Gotcha. Now, what is required for the application?
So I'm going to go
Okay.
to that.
Okay.
It's actually in the chat.
Oh,
I put it in the chat earlier.
Oh, good. I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
It's okay.
Alex, do you want to just talk about that a little bit since you're on mic here?
Yeah, sure.
I
Hi
have the
everyone.
page.
Yeah, my name is Alex Moore. I was actually typing up my email in the chat so that you guys all have it. I'm the Assistant Director of Graduate Recruitment in the Office of Graduate Admissions. So I will be happy to answer any of your admission related questions. So if you have any questions about, uploading your documents to your application, required items, anything like that, I'm your person and I'll be happy to help you. So yeah, if you want to just scroll down and then click on application checklist. So keep going, keep scrolling. So these are the items that you need to submit your application. So we need all your transcripts from all the institutions that you've attended. That includes undergrad, associate's degrees, master's degrees, certificates, anything, any institution that you've attended. We do need to see those official transcripts. If you want to send us an unofficial transcript for review, that's okay, but just keep in mind that you will need to submit an official transcript, at least in your first semester. So we just like to tell everybody just to submit everything official from the beginning, just so that you have it and you don't have to worry about it. So yeah, so we need to see your transcripts from all your institutions that attended.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? If we're already coming from the Montclair alternate route, do we still need to submit the transcripts?
So thank you for bringing that up. If you are a Montclair State alum, just indicate that you're Montclair State, that you attended Montclair State, and we will pull that on your behalf. So you don't have to worry about if you're a Montclair State alum.
Right. But what if you did your undergraduate somewhere else and then you're coming out of the P3 program? The
So
MAR
yeah,
program.
we would still need to see your undergraduate
Okay.
from
Okay,
whatever
perfect.
institution you went to. Yeah.
Perfect.
So this is the essay that you'll have to submit. And also when you go to submit your application, this will be there. So, don't feel like you have to memorize this or anything. But, in 250 to 300 words, just describe your current or recent experience as an educator and explain how the Montclair Master's Degree in Education and Teaching and Equity and Justice will help you reach your professional goals. We do read these. So just, please, take the time and, really put thought into these essays, because again, we do look at them and we do want to make sure that that you're answering, the question. You will need 2 letters of recommendation. they could be academic, they could be from your professors, or they can be from your colleagues or from, a supervisor. We just ask that they are not from family or friends. We really want to just kind of get an idea of, who you are as a professional. They can talk about your work ethic, any skills that you have, things like that. But just again, we just ask that they're not from family or friends. As we talked about before, we don't need standardized tests for this degree. And if you are applying, if you did attend an institution that was not in the United States, you do have to get it evaluated. That's the NACES, NACES. It has to be from accredited evaluation service. And that has to be official. So that has to come directly from the evaluation service to Montclair State.
And Alex, if I can just emphasize that these are the supplemental things for the MED. There may be addition, depending on which of the certificate or certification programs you're applying to also. Each one of those has its own list of requirements. So you may have to do another essay for one of those, or there may be other things that you would have to provide for those. I don't have a full list of that. Maybe at some point, Alex, we can work that up. Just have it.
Yep. And that's also on the website. So if you pretty much go to this site and just type in the program, every program has one of these little drop downs. So you can get it that way also for students.
So Joel, I see your question there. So we intentionally designed our alternate route program to be a credit-based program, specifically so that we could add a master's on top of it. Rutgers has an hours-based program. So I believe it's 400 or 450 hours over those 2 years. And unfortunately, those two systems don't really connect. The hours-based and the credit-based don't quite connect. And that's above and beyond the fact that we're currently only stacking our MED on top of programs that exist at Montclair State. And that includes that. So our alternate route students in the MED are going to be limited to those students doing their alternate route program at Montclair State. Now, that said, if there is another endorsement that you want to add, so like the computer science teaching or the bilingual-bicultural certificate, or I don't know if you saw, but the Ed assessment and the gifted and talented are each 9 credits. So you could actually stack those two together with the MED courses, and that would make 30 as well. But at this point, we are not yet able to stack on top of credits coming from other institutions, other than you maybe use them for the electives. Okay, so we're at about we're a little over 7. I can hang on and answer any questions that if people still have questions. If you registered for this, we will make both the slides and the video available to you. Feel free to share them. This is information we're trying to get out there. We are planning on selecting a cohort to begin, or I said cohort, not selecting a group to start in the fall with those 2 courses. And if this program appeals to you, I really encourage you to apply. And so thank you everybody for coming today.
When is the deadline to apply? I know it's rolling admissions, but that came up a lot. Like, when is the last possible time?
That's a good question. I think the very latest we can accept somebody is I think, Sammy, you and I talked about mid-August being
like August. We were thinking August 15th, perhaps, or that week. We can definitely solidify the date and get back to you. We have the list of attendees, but the first day of classes is September 4th. So we need enough time to admit you and get you registered for the courses. So the latest would probably be most likely August 15th.
Right. So, I mean, you can apply after August 15th, but that would mean you probably wouldn't be starting until the spring.
Correct.
So we have a rolling deadline, but if you're going to be able to register in the fall, and it does take time to get those transcripts and letters of recommendation and, to get everything together. So if it is something that you're thinking that you're going to do, I would encourage you to, put that folder together now and start, getting things in order and asking people to write those letters and that sort of thing. So here's the thing about the alternate route, and I mentioned this earlier, but so the alternate route one is a little bit different in that you can't apply to the master's program at the start of the alternate route program. You can only apply after you're like in that last semester of the alternate route, and then we bridge you right into the MED from the alternate route. That's because sometimes at the beginning of the alternate route, it's just trickier. And so you can be assured that if you start the alternate route and you're planning to complete it, that you can keep going for your master's. But unlike the other certificate programs, just because that's an initial teacher cert one, and again, it gets complicated, we make people wait until their last semester to apply for the MED. But you can tell people like, yeah, you're in a program that leads to a master's if that's what you want to, it can sometimes help to frame things that way, even in your own mind. But Dixon, yeah, I hope I answered your question about that. So you would start the alternate route program, and then once you're in that 4th semester of the alternate route program, if everything's going all right at your school and you're getting those good observations and you're going to complete the program, that's when you would apply to the MED.
I have a question. It's about the essay.
Sure.
So there's a part when you click on it for the essay and it pops up like the TESOL part, but I'm for the bilingual. So what questions am I exactly answering?
Can you give me a sense of where you are on the screen?
Are you talking about your actual application?
So I had seen before the bilingual questions, and then I clicked something. I don't remember where. Right now I can't pull it up because I'm at my son's baseball game. And then the TESOL questions, like asking questions about teachers of whatever.
It was
Special.
on once you applied, when you click to import your essay, it gives you 4 questions that you have to answer in a 4 to 5 page format. And it's about students, teachers of students with disabilities, I believe.
So we might have gotten some wires crossed. Again, this is the first cohort. We're still figuring things out. So if you can take a screenshot of that and maybe send it to me or Alex, and
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you could, or if you want, we can set up a Zoom meeting offline and we can try to figure it out.
We want to make sure you can apply.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have the screenshot already if you want me to email it to you.
Please.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions before we call it a night?
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Hi.
so much, Evan.
Oh, I had one quick question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So I had asked about the difference between like this and the MAT. I mean, this definitely seems like a great program. I'd be interested. I love the MSU P3 program. Just thinking like as far as career-wise, I'm seeing a lot like, masters plus 15, like, would this count as like the masters like that I would give to, my district in order to, thinking about growth there or like pay raise, things like that? Like
It would. In fact, that's how we got this program approved.
okay.
We had to show that a master's degree had value. And we used some of the data from the New Jersey's State School Boards Association, where, when you look across the pay scales throughout New Jersey, and we're a state institution, so we have to show that it has value within New Jersey. Most districts have a pay bump for people with a master's degree. Now, again, this is where it kind of gets into the weeds a little bit, because you can't have a master's plus 30 until you have a master's. So some districts say, okay, if you have a master's plus 30 or 60 credits, like that one, we have over 550 school districts in New Jersey. That one is a very wide-ranging question. But does this program count as a master's degree for the purposes of compensation and school board contracts? Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
There's a question about graduation. This is a degree program, and Doug, correct me, but they are eligible to participate in commencement. This is a
100%.
degree.
There is just truth in advertising. There is, I believe, like a $95 graduation fee.
$95.95 plus
Thank you.
$16 in shipping.
Right. And then there's the that's, but commencement is nice. It's nice to be able to finish those 30 credits and walk across the stage. It's really something. So yes, you are eligible, and you turn the tassel left to right, the whole deal.
Mhm.
Anything else? Okay. Thanks, everybody. So again, you will receive a follow-up email sometime within the next 24 hours with a link to this video and the slides from today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and we'll try to make sure you have all the information you need to make an informed decision about whether to apply for the M.Ed in Teaching for Equity and Justice. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to stop recording now.
I have sent over the email with the